It's the commonly dreaded exposition episode. However, thanks to the introduction of multiple characters and scenarios, it moves close to a breakneck pace. Let's get into the recap first. Denji and Makima make introductions, grab some grub, and the puppy dog and master relationship is established. Although Denji's mourning best boy Pochita, Makima has reason to believe that he may still be around. While Denji is thirsting for Makima, we get a glimpse of the Devil Hunter HQ in Tokyo, learning that there are over 1,000 Devil Hunters in the city alone. Capping off this tour, Denji is introduced to another public safety member, Aki, who he will be shadowing for the day. They get along so well that Makima decides that Denji and Aki should be living together and be working on the same unit. She lets Denji know he can't step out of line, or that resignation is possible because there's only one way out. But on the brighter side, it doesn't appear like Denji is having any trouble at all making himself feel at home. As the two boys hang around, we learn how disparate their upbringings and lives have been.
Huh? お前、義務教育受けてないのか? おー、受けてねえよ。
While on a mission, we also learn of fiends. These are devils who possess corpses. But everything in the episode until now was just foreplay, as Aki asks Denji to show him what he's got, and Denji doesn't transform and just chops off its head, stating that he prefers a more swift and painless approach, especially since he's part devil himself. This contrasts with Aki's brutal and vengeful method, which is reasoned by the death of his family at the hands of a devil. Now that Denji has secured food and shelter, he's pretty much living the desired life he wanted only a few days ago. However, he has an emerging feeling that he's missing out on something. At that moment, he has a divine epiphany, recalling another goal he wanted to accomplish.
夢叶うなら、女抱いてから死にてえな。
But he decides to pace himself and aim for second base. Later on, Makima introduces Power, a devil hunter, and also a fiend herself. However, since she's more intelligent than the average fiend, she gets to be on the payroll. Like Denji, she is also part of Aki's unit, and the two are sent to patrol the streets. Power proves if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Oh my god. There is so much going on, so let's break this down character by character. Starting with Denji, of course. He's still reeling from Pochita's death when he has his world completely turned upside down. But now we get to see another side of the world that rewards him instead of only promising punishment. A lot more carrot and a little less stick. In my review of the previous episode, I mentioned I had very mild criticism, a nitpick if you will, that I thought the show was leaning too hard on the dog comparisons. Well, that's the entire episode. Not simply terrible, but definitely lacking subtlety. You can take that for what it's worth, talking about a show where a man's face transforms into a chainsaw, but leaving that aside, there is definitely an angle to the dog comparison that wasn't considered in the first episode. When granted all the necessary food and shelter that Denji would need, he's still only acting on animal instinct, yearning for companionship and sexual gratification. He also doesn't seem to care whether the people he likes or dislikes even respect him, though you can see him putting pieces together that there is something he is missing from his life. A goal, a plan. Then he falls back on his sexual urges. More examples of this. Makima threatens him twice, once on the car ride and another at Tokyo HQ, but quickly returns to his lewd thoughts. I know there may be those who will be irked by his vulgar attitude, but I do believe there is enough evidence to infer that there is more going on than titillating the audience. There is a character flaw being presented. It's preventing him from seeing Makima's manipulative nature or from forging a goal that could fulfill him. You might be wondering why he's so oblivious. Well, aside from the entirety of the first episode, this episode does a good job of showing how far from a normal person he is by introducing a foil character in Aki. He leans way more on the stoic side than Denji. Before meeting him in this episode, we already know he has all the basic necessities, food, shelter, and work. Despite the murdered family, this hasn't affected him from forming relationships or receiving an education. And most notably, he is driven and has a clear goal he wants to accomplish. All things that reinforce how brutal and abnormal Denji's upbringing was by comparison. Besides that, Aki also being a romantic rival made for the best laughs of the episode and was my favorite character.
もう一回抱きてえな。
Power. She seems to act exclusively on her instincts, and I imagine we will see a lot of parallels between her and Denji moving forward, regardless of how annoying he found her to be. We did see him sympathize with that fiend, and I know afterwards he claims he only gave that demon a swift death because he didn't want to make a mess over the porno mags, but his rationale sounds too well thought out, and although he claims he had never had any friends, the audience already knows his best friend is a demon. So it's likely he'll have no reservations about being friends with a fiend. Makima. Oof. Bad vibes. Chilling even. If you recall the lines spoken at the end of the last episode where it sorta sounded like she was talking to him as a pet, well, she confirms that's exactly what she thinks of him in this episode, in no uncertain terms. She'll treat him to udon, clothe him, tell him what he wants to hear, give him a job and lodgings, but doesn't let him forget the position he is in. He tries to flee, he's dead. Which I thought was odd that she needed to remind him because we already had a flashback to the warehouse scene. I know he was exhausted, but from the audience perspective, seemed bizarre that he acts as if he never had this conversation. But a minor issue. Now, everything she's doing could be justified from her perspective, we just haven't been given it yet. But presumptions can be made. We know Denji is a rare devil-human hybrid, and we know regular demons are dangerous enough, so having his assistance could be invaluable, and you don't want him wandering around wherever he pleases, of course. In one scene we learned she also saved Aki's life, and he's probably saved many other lives over his 3-year tenure. So not necessarily a bad person based on the actions we've seen in this episode, not quite yet at least. Definitely more mature and cunning than the other characters we've met so far. If I had a criticism for the episode, and I honestly can't quite call it that at this point, but how does she know that Denji is not going to run off and cause havoc? It's not as if we see a tracker get placed on him, or something of that nature. Sure, she got an idea of who he is, but only for about a day. I'm not sure if you could tell that much about a person. You know, he could be putting on a dopish front for all she knows. However, we haven't seen what Aki's abilities are, and we know he's the one in charge of all the freaks, so you'd assume he can rein them in. But now that I say that, he did get his ass kicked by Denji, not necessarily in a life or death situation, but I'll give it a little bit more time before I make a final judgment on that. The only thing left of interest, Power seems to be conjuring weapons through her blood, so it'll be interesting to see if they do anything creative with that. Another point of interest, she and Makima share similar eyes, so I thought that must have meant Makima was also a fiend. But that didn't line up once I went back and saw the pincer fiend didn't have the same distinctive eyes. A very intriguing episode, accomplished a lot by introducing and fleshing out characters and world building, and still able to keep a brisk pace, while also not being convoluted. Everything is explained simply and in plain terms. Still no major conflicts or villains are encountered, but not like this episode needed it, and honestly, could take its time. I was so gratified with this episode, I could use another one like it. More character work and more world building before kicking off an arc. That's all for now.